Welcome everyone to our episode 129. Today we are going to talk, discuss, reflect about the ancestral emotional patterns and how is affecting us in our lives and how it is generating these epigenetic marks, this epigenetic memory, what is happening with all this information. So, the name of the episode is Why Do Your Ancestors Affect Your Life? And to talk about this topic, I had to read a lot of literature to know what was happening, not just in the term of the emotional damage that we perform many times on ourselves, because it's not that many of these things are hidden or many of these things are not known, is just that you don't want to be responsible of many of those things and you don't have the patience, the reflective time to interview your parents, to interview your grandparents, and to know more about their stories and about what happened to them and understand the pain, understand the struggle, understand that they also live a very complicated life with a lot of damage, with much less information in terms of how to process many of the complicated emotions, and with many abuses and many toxic society norms that we don't have nowadays. We have other things, but we are going to discuss about all of that information. So I used three articles to talk about this, and one of the articles was from the person that discovered the constellation therapy, which is the healing power of the past through a system therapy or systemic therapy. And the name of this person is Bert Hellinger. And he was the person that discovered this process of healing people through understanding the ancestral lineage. The other articles that I use talk about these family constellation systems and how they are a psychotherapeutic process that also allows the person to know their own identity. And the last one is healing the wounds of our fathers and intergenerational trauma, memory, and symbolization of the narrative. So let's go directly to the information because it is a long episode, as I'm going to discuss many ideas that we are going to navigate in how to understand them better and how to assemble a much um, clearer picture of our lives. So, living in a world that is governed by traditions, by societal expectations, we often feel boxed, confined by roles that don't truly fit us. And there is a cultural heritage and impose restrictions that will shape our lives, sometimes at the expense of our uniqueness and freedom. And many of those things are the ones that our parents and grandparents have to live with, much more than the ones that we have now. We have different ones also that we now have to deal with. And all of these structures also provide, when they are healthy, the foundational values and meaning. And that's how we are understanding our lives, and that's how we reflect about our lives. So, the first question to reflect on this is, are you able to detect the emotional patterns that many times you are performing in your life? There is a lot of environmental changes in our emotional landscape that are shaped by this cultural heritage, by this tradition, by many patterns that you saw, examples of behaviors and toxic emotional traumas. And that's the process that we need to start healing constantly and be more aware. These inherited influences can deeply affect how we feel and act in our daily lives, and we sometimes don't know why or how. So, by acknowledging and addressing these legacies, we can begin to transform, to shape our emotional well being, and foster healthier relationships and break free from the past and create a much brighter, clearer, and more fluid future in our own lives. So, to start with the ideas of these three articles, let me just bring to your attention that this cultural influence is represented by this culture wheel. And this is the influence that traditions and social expectations have on us. So, our lives, as I mentioned, will be shaped by these traditions, and we should be able to be aware of which ones resonate with us and which can sometimes feel restrictive and don't make any sense in our lives. So here we are seeing that there is a representation of having greater community. Of course, this would be the healthy example to foster, to promote, to exemplify with other people, collaborate, help one another, and think that we are, in essence, the same. We are the same if we take away the frontiers, if we take away many of the restrictive language barriers, if we take away the restrictiveness of the race. For example, we are the same and we are here to help each other to uh, first to survive, then to thrive. So next is knowledge and the stories. And in this category, there is a lot of information that is going to come to us by stories, by tales, by religion, by many of those narratives that are going to give us the knowledge of certain traditions, certain values are going to be also highlighted here. And this is one of the most important categories because we all need healthy value. We all need these foundational values that are going to allow us to be better human beings and not human beings that are just pursuing ambition, pursuing wealth, in despite being or stepping on other people and not considering anything about them. And these values are the ones that are going to be structured in the family system. That's why there is a tendency to break this nuclear system of the family. Now, language. Language is also one of the categories that is extremely important because without a language, we cannot understand each other. And if we don't understand each other, sometimes even in the same language, and sometimes we have difference between genders, for example, and how we speak, well, there is much more difficulty when we are not speaking the same language because also we are not imbued in the culture system of each of the countries and we don't understand what is happening and why people think like that in certain parts of the world. So there is traditions and rituals that also pass on information that is extremely important for many of us. And these traditions and rituals also, you need to become aware of which ones are the ones that are making you grow and expand and which ones are the ones that are making you think and be more restrictive and narrow-minded. So in addition to that, we have these techniques and skills that we need and we are using and developing. And both sides of our family have different skills and techniques to solve problems. So we need to learn from them. And both of them are important in the construction of the identity of a new person. So tools and objects, of course, represent something important because it is not the same tools and objects that we have nowadays than 30, 20, or even 10 years ago. So we need to adapt our senses and our skills to the new tools and objects that we are handling, which now include, of course, this digital technology that we are using now and the toxic part of that we are going to speak plenty in the next ideas about social media. The arts, music, cinema, episodes of a series are also ways of transmitting knowledge, emotions, and certain values that we can perceive. Even in the worst sense, many of these arts are not used correctly, and many times they want to influence certain bias of the culture. So just pay attention to what you are consuming, and pay attention also to how food and drinks, for example, uh, help so that people create new social connections. In many countries, in my country, in Mexico, we have a very strong tradition of using food and drinks to mix with other people, to understand their thinking, to understand and make sense of their lives. And it is easier to speak with people while you are having a meal. So all of this creates this culture of will and creates the influence of traditions and social expectations. And that will create an identity of a certain person, and that will create a pattern that will be inherited. So that's why this is the beginning. So reflect. My advice or my tip for you is to reflect more on which traditions truly resonate with you and which ones you can let them go and you can live more authentically. So let's go with the second idea, which is the inherited emotional patterns. So these unresolved traumas from past generations can manifest as unexplained emotions and behaviors in our lives, but they are not unexplained, they are not hidden, they are just in the genetic imprint of your mom and your dad, and both of them contributed in equal part to the assembly of your genetic footprint. So this genetic information is the one that is shaping you, is the one that you are exploring in your own life. And we have sometimes a stronger influence from the father side or from the mother side, and that depends on the narratives, beliefs, practices, and behaviors that each of the members of the family have. So this has to do also with the economic factors, resources, the neighborhood safety, the community cohesion. Everything is shaping your mother, your father, and all of that culture is being reflected in the narratives, in the beliefs, in the practices that are going to be inherited through this transgenerational transmission of information. So you need to pay attention, close attention to who do you are more like. You resemble your father, or you are more mirroring your mother, because you are. And if not, if you don't find any coincidence in them, probably you are mirroring your grandfather or your grandmother from any of the sides. So start being curious about the things that you are inheriting. what is the tip that I can give you? Identify these recurring emotional patterns that don't seem to stem from your own experiences, that probably sometimes they just pop up like a window in your computer that is just trying to promote something, and that creates an experience that many times can be toxic. So consider exploring their origin, and you will only get to that origin if you have more curiosity with your parents and with your grandparents and what was the story of them. And that will make them also heal and help to reflect about many of the things that they also have, and that will heal everyone. I will speak about that, and that's the next topic. This is about, or this is one of the techniques that the family constellations therapy uses. This therapeutic approach uncovers these hidden family dynamics and helps resolve these ancestral emotional entanglements. And they are literally this entanglement. They are just in a tight knot that you cannot um, undo. You need to help make it more fluid, and the scheme of the family constellation system is usually held in groups that can be as big as 20 or 25 participants, or can be as small as 5 or 6 people. So, in order to choose the representatives, we need someone that facilitates this system, which is the green phase that is represented in this diagram. And this is the facilitator of the constellation process. This person is going to choose who's going to be the active participant, and is going to choose those participants in terms of the conflict that needs to be dealt with. And there are going to be people that are going to experience this in the constellation dynamic system, that are going to be chosen by this facilitator, and they are going to feel many of the symptoms and emotions of the family members that need to be healed. So after these roles are assigned, the client places these representatives according to the roles in the room as a real family. So the dynamic is trying to be represented with the parents and the grandparents, probably, or even more. And they subconsciously, these representatives experience various emotions and bodily sensations. They really feel those things and thoughts similar to those real members of the client's family system with reasonable accuracy. So, why is this happening? Because the process of this system and dynamic allows the people in the whole representation to get to a level of the subconscious mind, and probably sometimes even the unconscious mind, and to release many of this information that is around in the field, because we have that access for the information. We just need to be in the level of the vibration system to enter and to receive this information and to be able to represent this information. That's why many of these things happen in the subconscious part of the brain. But the important thing about this is that the facilitator helps to interpret the participants' psychological interactions in this constellation, and makes the interventions questions to improve the interactions between the client, his symptom, and his family members or her family members. So it is extremely important that all of this dynamic, all of this drama representation, let's just say it like this, is going to have an objective, and the objective is to heal certain physical ailment or emotional struggle or emotional entanglement that exists within you and within your family, and that is blocking the energy to achieve many, many things in your life. So, if you have these kind of deep emotional entanglements, deep problems, or you feel that you are sabotaging yourself and you don't understand why, many times these kind of therapies help to undo and resolve these entanglements and facilitate that the emotional information travels through you and becomes uh, liberated, released, and healed. And then your life is going to start changing, and even diseases are going to be healed. And the article that where I obtained this image from is one article that spoke about psoriasis and about many skin diseases that the family members have. So by doing these family therapy constellations, the they broke the emotional entanglement and they allowed the healing process to happen, and they healed their conditions. So it is not magic, it is energy. Emotions are energy, and when emotions are stocked in your body, you become ill and you start developing a chronic disease. And that's the epigenetic explanation of that. So if you feel that you have these deep wounds, try to participate and look for a facilitator of these family constellation systems, because it will allow you to understand many, many things. The other thing that you can do is uh, start this interview with your parents and start trying to understand what they suffer in spite of being strong. If you think that you need help, well, just look for the um, professional practitioner that can help you to reflect about this process. But if not, just do the interview and write down the things that you need to uh, understand and to make sense in your story. So once you do that, we need to also understand where are these wounds and entanglements generated from. Many of these wounds are generated in the childhood stage or in the teenage stage of development, and this affects, of course, the brain and how it is being rewired if we have certain traumas or if we have certain experiences. During the adolescence, our brains undergo significant changes, very, very strong changes that lead to the development of a mature world view and making sense. And often, in that stage of the teenage brain, there is a rebellious behavior that has a perfect explanation, which I'm going to try to explain just with three structures of this representation of the brain. So let's take this blue structure that is represented here, and it is the amygdala. This region of the brain is in charge of the emotional core for passion, for impulse, for fear, for aggression, and for many other strong emotions. And adults rely not less, but they are better able to regulate this region. And they use, because they have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, and that prefrontal cortex helps them to regulate the amygdala. Some adults, of course, I'm talking about the ones that had this maturation process. The ones that don't, they keep acting like adolescents. So teens or adolescents are more impulsive because of this region. So that's why they sometimes do things in extreme. And also because the structure that is above, that is in red, is the prefrontal cortex, and that prefrontal cortex is the function of that region is to plan, to reason, and it grows until we have 25 years. So in some people, they need more time, but that's the average. 25 years is fully developed. And in adolescents and teens, it's still immature and it's prone to high risk behavior. So that's why they are also rebellious, because they don't have fully developed this region of the brain. They have more an amygdala sensation of strong emotions. That's why they need to be understood. And that's why you need to be more empathetic about these changes, because they are also difficult for them and they don't understand them many times. And that doesn't mean that you are going to create uh, adults that have 40 years old and they don't know how to think, how to plan, how to reflect on things, and how to solve their own problems. That doesn't mean at all. So the only thing that you have to do is try to allow them by questioning, and not questioning in form of an interrogatory, but more about curiosity. Why do they feel like any kind of emotion that they are struggling with? Try to ask questions, try to ask and allow them to explain you why do they feel like that, because many times it has to do with their relationships that they are having and the struggle that they have. And more we see that these new generations struggle with these relationship issues because they don't know how to do these social interactions due to the excessive amount of social interaction in the networks, in the digital form. So social media is destroying the brain of many of these adolescents and teenagers. That's why there is a lot of now information that is making sense of why teenagers and adolescents shouldn't have much time, or they shouldn't have a phone with access to this social media until they are 16 years old, probably. And if you give them before, just be careful with what they see and the kind of media that they have access to, because many of these social media platforms are designed to generate toxic emotions, and the algorithms and all of those things uh, are extremely skillful to promote images that generate interactions. And those interactions and those images, many times, are toxic. So I will show you how a response from something that you saw in social media, it's a response that is going to be translated in your whole body. And many systems, many organs in your body are going to be activated as much as having a real threat or a real attack. So one more region that I want to mention here is the parietal lobe. And this parietal lobe, which is in yellow represented here, is responsible for your senses, for touch, for sight, for language, and it grows until you have 20 years old. So more or less, that's the fully developed region. And adolescents and teens do not process this information effectively. Imagine, and I'm going to read that again. Teenagers and adolescents do not process information in the same way or effectively than an adult. That's why if you fill their brains with overstimulation in the social media platforms and with toxic information, what are you going to provoke? That they have an overflow of information, emotions, and they have those two other regions, the red one and the blue one that we spoke about, underdeveloped. So those toxic emotions are going to be translated into more irrational, rebellious behaviors or destructive behaviors, which is what we are seeing in our youth population. We are seeing more anxiety, we are seeing more depression, we are seeing more uh, suicidal thoughts, we are seeing more toxic behaviors because these three regions are essential for them to understand the world, to understand emotions, to understand that it is just a simple picture. We as adults, we see that and we are able to understand and we are able already to regulate more, but they are not. For them, it's too much. Seeing an image of them make where they are being making fun of, or where they don't have their best outfit or whatever, for you is trivial. For them, it's too much. So if you keep feeding that cycle, you are going to generate more disruptions in this brain rewiring system. So my tip is restrict the time that they are in these kind of social platforms and be very smart about knowing what they are watching and explaining as much as possible why certain emotions are happening in them, and use this period of life, the adolescence and teenage, allow them exploration. And exploration means having more social interactions, moving more in the real world, understanding more real behaviors, not behaviors that are just represented in social platforms. Challenge inherited beliefs and explain them, seeking understanding with how they are growing and how they are feeling the things, and try to understand that those intense emotions come from the development of these regions of the brain. So, next, now this is what happens. Imagine, I'm going to try to explain all the way through this response that starts with something that you are watching in the social platforms. So just pay attention to the amount of damage that that can do. When you detect a threat and your limbic system, which is the emotional system, interprets that from your amygdala, you are a teenager, you are an adolescent, and you start using all of these regions that are not fully developed, you create a response that travels from the hippocampus, amygdala and hippocampus create a response, then travels to the hypothalamus, travels to the anterior pituitary gland, and then you start releasing substances, hormones, neurotransmitters, neuropeptides that are going to start activating the autonomic nervous system, such as corticotropin, such as adeno, adenocorticotropin. You are going to start releasing also many neurotransmitters, glutamate, serotonin, gamma aminobutyric acid, which is GABA, that is involved in this signal transmission. And they are going to be received by these receptors of stress response, and the stress response is going to be activated, and many neuropeptides are going to be produced, including vasopressin, including corticotropin releasing factor hormone, which is now we are translating the neuropeptides and neurotransmitters to hormones because the response is being passed on. And then we generate more and more substances, chemical substances, which are going to activate the adrenal cortex. And that will lead to the release of stress related hormones that will mediate or regulate the stress response. And that will induce changes in your heart rate. So you are going to start generating adrenaline or adrenaline, and that's going to generate changes in your blood pressure, changes in your heart rate, changes in muscle contraction, changes in glucose metabolism. Imagine this, you are just getting into the level of your metabolism. So, this is the explanation also why many young generations have so much problems with hypertension now, with obesity, with diabetes, with insulin resistance, etc. Many chronic diseases also have this emotional explanation. And what is happening in the parallel side, let's say, the adrenal cortex is also stimulating the release of glucocorticoids, and these glucocorticoids are going to generate in the receptors an immune response as if you are being attacked. So your immune response is going to be signaled or translated with substances such as these cytokines that are represented in these pictures here and these small pellets that we see. And all of those substances are going to travel to the afferent projections of the vagus nerves, and they are going to get to the microglia, to the neurons. They are going to make synapses, and they are going to feed again the limbic system and the forebrain. And you are going to create again this toxic cycle until you stop the stress signal. And what is this stress? The stress signal? The stress signal comes from social media. So all of this reaction is going to create epigenetic changes. These epigenetic changes are the ones that I spoke about in the episodes of epigenetics that represents that you are interfering in the reading of the genes and you are producing a defective protein or an incomplete protein that is not going to be functional. So all of this accumulation of defective or non-functional proteins is going to lead to the disease. So that's the way we start generating these responses in adolescence and in the stage of childhood, either via social media or by the toxic behaviors that you are not able to clean from your past generations. Whatever the origin is, this response is the same, and this response causes the same damage. So, what is the practical thing that you can do? Start being conscious of the content and the things and the behaviors that you are having in your life. Practice meditation and mindfulness, yoga, something that calms your mind, that allows you to be more reflective. Learn how to manage your stress and mitigate many of these negative potential impacts of the inherited trauma on your own body. If you, as a parent, heal your own traumas by interviewing your parents and understanding the story, or by this constellation therapy, you are healing the next generation because you are not transferring this information, you are not making toxic behaviors, you are not doing toxic behaviors, you are not following the same path that your parents have, and they have a lot less information and a lot less knowledge that you now have. So use this knowledge, this availability of things that we have now, and try to understand more about their stories and try to make amends with many of the things that happen in your life due to probably the unconscious ways that you were raised with. So, overall, these generational healing rituals is about creating more uh, things that you can do in your life, these rituals to honor and acknowledge your ancestors' experience, understand more of their lives, and that will foster a sense of connection with your parents, with your grandparents, and to allow you to give closure with the past traumas and promoting a healing breaking of the cycle of negative emotional patterns across generations. If you break those traumas, those cycles, you are allowing space to to be healed, you, and to heal the next generations, and you are becoming more aware of this hidden generational influence in your own life. So that will allow you to have a much better experience in your life, and that will start bringing you more healing sense in your life, more abundance, more uh, awareness of what things are happening, and the release of toxic energy will pave the way to be healthier, to be happier, and to have a more fulfilling life where you really feel that you now have the skills and the abilities to create a completely different life than the one that you have. And it's never too late. So start becoming motivated about doing these interviews and doing this healing process. I hope that I have inspired you to go further into the interaction with your parents, with their stories, understanding more how we absorb that information when we were teenagers or in our childhood stage, and that's why we couldn't process many of the traumas or the toxic behaviors or the examples that we saw, because many of the regions of the brain were not fully developed, and it didn't make sense for us in those stages. But nowadays, you can make sense as an adult. You can create this healing, you can forgive, and you can let go. And that's the most important step, to let go and to open space in your own life to make difference in your own generations to come. Thank you very much for paying attention. Thank you very much for listening all the way. I hope that you have arrived until the end. And if you like this episode, if I make you reflect, if I allow you to be curious about your ancestral past, help me with comments, with reactions, and with forwarding this information. And of course, as always, I remind you to subscribe to the channel, to the YouTube channel and the other platforms. And if you can, just give me a review. Thank you very much for your attention and for being here. We will listen to each other on our next episode. Bye.